Hi friends, hi, how's it going? How you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I'm doing the next review of a palette in my palette roulette series. Today we'll be reviewing the Lorac Pro palette, the very first Lorac palette. The first one in my collection anyway. I do hope that you're in for it and that sounds like something that you're interested in because that is what we are doing today. This is a series on my channel in which I take a palette that is in my collection that might also be in your collection and I utilize it throughout the week. I come back to you, I talk to you about my experiences with the palette. I show you some pictures of the eye looks I was able to create, do some live swatches, and then we move on. We find another palette and we do it over again next week. So I do hope that that sounds like something that you're interested in and you'll stick around, watch the video. I give some really great insights and information on the palette, if I do say so myself. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I am a lover of all things high-end colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as a district leader for Ulta, and I get a lot of education in my position, so I like to bring you all that education through things on my channel, like reviews. You're going to see all the regular YouTube beauty community kind of content here on my channel. Project pans, shop my stashes, all the things. But I also just kind of like to talk about makeup, so I'm a wee bit chatty. If you're in for a chatty creator, you have found her. I hope that you find that this channel warms your heart as much as it soothes my soul, and that you'll want to subscribe before you go. And with that said, let's move into this review, my friends. All right, friends, today we are reviewing the Lorac Pro palette. This is, from everything I can remember, the first Lorac palette in my collection and the only standing Lorac palette in my collection still currently. I have had multiple Lorac palettes in my collection. I had a mountain sunset and an ocean sunset palette. They were from the Unzip line. And then I also had the Lorac Pro 3 in this collection, I do believe. And I gave that palette to my daughter. I got that one in gratis. And it wasn't my vibe back then, so I gave it to her, and now looking at that palette as I was doing my research for this one, I was like, man, why did I get rid of that palette? But it went to a good home. My daughter loved it. She used it all the time. I think that she still uses it all the time, so there's that. This is what this palette looks like. It does have like that soft matte palette structure, and while I love that, I also think that that is awful because you can see, as you can see, every single fingerprint on it. It gets dirty really fast and it's super hard to clean all the way through. It's not like velvet, but it's soft matte touch, much like NARS, like the NARS packaging. It is a $42 palette and it has 0.19 ounces of product in it, or 0.02 ounces per pan. That's important because that is a really small pan. This would be an easy palette, I have to assume, to pan because the palette pans are so tiny. The back of the palette looks like this. Again, you can see all the fingerprints. And then inside the palette, you do have a nice size mirror. This is what the shadows look like. And the palette does bend back on itself so that you can hold it really nicely in your hand. It doesn't cause any kind of crampiness or awkwardness to hold it. This is the 16 shadows in this palette, and we do have 8 mattes on top and 8 shimmers on bottom, so it has that perfect 50-50 mix that I really like in a palette. Originally, these palettes came with an eye primer, behind a Lorac behind the scenes eye primer that boasted that you could use this eye primer to help your shadows last longer, which I appreciate because that is them telling you straight up these shadows work best with a primer. They truly, truly do for longevity purposes, but I still think that they performed really well without a primer. I'll get there in a second. This is a very neutral color story. This isn't my typical cup of tea. I am a color lover. But here lately, I am also a neutral lover. Like, I just think that my eyes look really good with a neutral eye on the lid. Like, I don't know. Like, and it's like grown up. I might as well grow up sometime, right? But I will still 100% of the time prefer a color story over a neutral color story. But I really did enjoy the color story in this palette. Neutral color story with great pigmentation, but this formula, I guess, could be hard for beginners because it's straight up pigment from the very start. But these blend out beautifully. Sometimes when a shadow is straight up pigment from the very start, it's rocket science to get it to blend out and blend out well. This is not the case with these shadows. Every single shadow in this palette is super soft to the touch, very buttery smooth, very smooth on application as well. It doesn't create any kind of texture on your eyelid if it doesn't already exist, but at the same time, doesn't exacerbate the texture on your eyelid that does exist if you have textured eyelids. Of course, like I said a minute ago, it works best with primer for longevity, lasting about 12 hours with primer, but I found that they also lasted about 8 without primer before you saw significant fading in these shadows. So I don't think that there's honestly anything wrong with how they perform without a primer, because an 8-hour day is pretty typical for most people. They want their stuff to last at least that 8 hours that they're at work. I would also say that as they start to fade away, they fade away honestly beautifully. It's not like you're gonna see like voids in your eye look where you have created some kind of like story of color on your eyelid. They do fade beautifully, and I think that you get that a lot with neutral eyeshadows. There is a mix of warm and cool tones in this palette, which I think speaks well to anybody who wants to use it. But I also think that it speaks well for beginners because you're going to get a lot of both instead of just lumping you into a cool eye color story or a warm eye color story. You get your pick of the litter. And warm and cool tones mix together very, very well, typically. With that said, you also get a couple of, a few like colors. So you can dabble into a colorful eye look a little bit if you really want to. This blue is a beautiful blue. This purple is almost a black purple. There's a ton of fallout with this palette. I don't find that to be a deal breaker, but a lot of people do. So I like to mention it in the review of the palette. But with that said, there's also a lot of kick up in the pan. And that is what also lends me to believe that this would be a perfect palette for Pan That Palette, because there's a ton of kick up in the pan. So even just dipping your brush, even just touching your brush to the shadow, there's a ton of just like dustiness that comes from it. The shimmers in this palette are not exactly shimmers, I would say. I think that they're more satins than they are shimmers. They're definitely not super impactful, and impactful I mean like shiny and bright and like, ooh, what is on your lid kind of mindset that you get from other people. You're not going to find that with this formula. Like, I think that it's beautiful, but I don't think that you're going to get the shine out of it that we're used to in shimmers today. They are more frosty than they are shimmery. That being said, they're not glittery, so you could pretty much use any of them without being like scared of the glitter. I'm scared of the glitter. You might not be scared of the glitter, but I am. This one here, which is on my eyelid today, is the only one that I found that had a little bit of like chunkiness to it, and I do believe that it's also got a little bit of a glitter kick to it, whereas the other shimmers in this palette just don't. They're more frosty than they are anything else. I found myself really wanting that kick because that's what I'm accustomed to and that's what I really love. So I was topping them with my Cliona shadows because I wanted that impactful eyelid shade that I just wasn't getting from this palette. I didn't put Cliona on my lids today. I couldn't find this palette for sale anymore. I don't know if it's because they've come out with a whole new makeup of the brand or no. When I looked at the palettes on the Lorac website, they have a whole new palette structure. There is a couple of pro palettes still left, which makes me wonder why this one is not. But they are still selling just a couple of pro palettes. But for the most part, there's a whole new updated formula that has occurred. And it does include glittery shimmers. It also includes foiled metallics, and then of course their matte formula. So you're going to see not this shimmer formula in your new palettes that you get from Lorac. They are also refillable palette. The pan size is the same, but they sell refillables. Granted, there's only 6 of them that are, I'm sure these are their most used shades that are in the refillable 6. But you can take the pan out and replace it with another one. Or if the palette that you have doesn't have the shade that you love, you can buy one of the singles and replace any one of those pans with that palette that you love, or that pan that you love, which I thought was brilliant that they're doing that. Much like Natasha Denona, or, you know, any of the other palettes that you can move the pans around in. Their new shimmer formula, like I said, looks much different than this shimmer formula, and that leads me to believe I need to try one of their palettes. But their palettes, their new palettes, kind of bore me. Like, I'm not into it right now. I was thinking, like, there's one I think called the Enchanted Mystic or something like that. I can't remember, but it is the more colorful of the palettes that they have for sale now. I was thinking about that one. They boast themselves as a pro brand, but it's just weird to me that they don't include like different colors. So anyways, their new palettes have 18 shades in them. This one has 16, and their new palettes sell for $39. This one was $42. And then of course they have the singles, which cost $8 for the singles. Did I spit and spurt my way through this? Because I feel like I'm new today. Like I'm just doing this for the very first time, which isn't the case. We all know that. But let me swatch these for you, and then we'll get on out of here. I love this white and I love the black. Let me just tell you that black, man, a little dab will do you. If you take more than a dab, you're going to ruin your day. Your whole eye look is going to be awful because you took more than a dab of that black. So here we go. Let's start with the mattes, of course. First we have white, which as you can see is just a white matte. It is cool toned. It's very beautiful. It works well as an inner corner or a brow bone shade. Then we have cream, which is also super beautiful. Works well as a brow bone or an inner corner highlighter. This is a warm beige, creamy color. It's got kind of like a pinky undertone to it. Then we have taupe, which is a warm gray brown. Then we have light pink, which is a cool toned pinky color and also works well as an inner corner or a brow bone shade. I use this so much in my brow bone. It's a beautiful pink. Then we have mauve, which is a plummy pink. Then we have sable, which is your warm brown tone. Then we have espresso, which is your cool brown tone. It kind of has a gray, like a real charcoaly gray flip to it. And then we have black. So those are all the mattes in the palette. I think that the mattes perform beautifully. They blend out beautifully. They're so buttery soft and smooth to the touch. I can't remember the last time I touched a formula that was as silky as this one is. So like I really commend them on their mattes. Their mattes are beautiful. And even that black, as crazy pigmented as it is, it blends really beautifully. You just have to take the smallest amount, or as I said, you're gonna hate your life. Okay, then we have some of the shimmer formula, and I am gonna do them right here. We have first nude. This is a champagne creamy tone, really beautiful shade. It is more, like I said earlier, a frosty shimmer. It could dupe out as a matte if you wanted it to. It's just got a little tiny bit of a sheen to it. Then we have champagne, which is more of a rosy champagne color. It is on my lid today, and it is the most chunky of the shimmers. I feel like this one maybe does have a little bit of glitter in it, but it's like literally the most minuscule amount of glitter. It still isn't like super impactful on an eye look, but it is beautiful on an eye look. Then we have gold, which gold is kind of a light yellowy copper color more than it is a gold color. I mean, it kind of has a little bit of gold in it, but it's more of a copper in my opinion. Then we have light bronze. That was a pinky swatch, so I'm going to go in one more time because pinky swatches are horrible. We have light bronze. Light bronze is kind of a warm peachy yellow tone more than it is a bronze. And then we have pewter, which is a medium, like rosy brown tone. It does lean very pink in some of the eye looks. Whatever matte you pair it with, I guess it could lean brown, and it leans pink with some of the pinker colors. The last three would be the more colorful shades that you can kind of color up an eye look with, but they're still not super colorful. Like this one is Garnet, and Garnet is a red toned brown. Then we have this one, which is called Deep Purple, which is, as you can see, really black looking. It's a blackened purple. It does show up purple in an eye look, but like barely. Then we have this one here, which is called Slate, and it is like a blue toned charcoal. So those are the shades in the Lorac Pro palette. And as you can see, there is some warm tones and there is some cooler toned shades in this palette. Also, you can see with the shimmers, they're more frosty than they are anything else. There's not a whole lot of impact to those. There's not a whole lot of shimmer actually to those. I think that they should have been renamed Frosts because that's really what I feel like they are. When I think of shimmers, I don't think of these as shimmers. I think of them as satins or frosts that I can also put into my crease that I can blend out into like my brow bone area, which I did do with this palette. The one thing I will say that I kind of loved but also hated about this palette is it is very dark. It's either very, very dark or non-existent. So if you go with all the light tones towards, you know, this section of the palette, on my skin tone, you can barely see this color. This color is on my lower lash line today, and I think, you know, I use it to blend out, and I used it to blend out because it's hardly visible. This color is, you know, impactful in a way that it kind of whitens up the skin tone, or brightens, I should say, up the skin tone. But like from here over, like these 8 shades right here barely showed up on my skin tone. This gold did the most, but barely showed up on my skin tone. These ones over here are all the dark shades, and therefore I had to create a really dark eye or have shadows in my eye look that just didn't show up. This eye look today, I have on the pink down first to put into like my brow bone area. Then I put this taupe down, and I don't think that you can see it. Then I put this color down, and you can see it. I mean, that is this color here, blended out. But then I had to put this into the crease to give it a little bit more oomph. And then I put this one into the outer corner and a little bit into the crease to deepen up this shade that was deepening up this shade. And I get that you do that multiple times in an eye look, like you want a deeper, but I also kind of want to see the gradient, and I just don't think that I can see the gradient really until I got to this shade. You couldn't see really the difference. You couldn't see the gradient. You can't see the gradient. So you either have a non-existent eye look or you have a really deep dark eye look. I can play with it. I don't mind it, and I will be keeping this palette in my collection. It's the only Lorac palette I have. I am interested in picking up one of their new ones just to see how the formulation has changed. And as far as I can tell, you can't pick up this palette anymore, which is very sad to me because it is a really good palette. They do have a couple of other like color stories in this, you know, 16-pan Lorac Pro lineup that they're still selling, just not this one. So there's that. It is what it is. I think that the palette was beautiful, and I think that the shadows blended out so beautifully. I think that there's a lot that can be said about this formulation and how easy it is to use And I do think that a lot of brands who have, you know, buttery formulas that are straight up pigmentation could take lessons from Lorac in how to create that straight up pigmentation, but also create a blendable color. Because sometimes when they have those straight up pigmentation markers in their formulation, it's also not a blendable shadow. So there's that. And sometimes when they have straight up pigmentation in the shadow, I keep on going here, they're also kind of grippy in the pan. These are not. They're so buttery smooth. So one thing I will also like to just point out is there is next to no staining. We do have a little bit of staining with those last three, you know, shimmer shades, but other than that, there's no staining on my arm, and that's just with me taking it off with water. So they're super easy to remove as well, and you're not going to find that kickback in an eye look that you maybe don't want to deal with. So that's it. That's all I have for you on the Lorac Pro palette. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section on this palette. I would be interested to hear your thoughts. I know one of my subscribers who, you know, we chatter back and forth all the time, posted that this is the only Lorac palette that they can use these days because they've somehow developed allergies to all the other Lorac palettes, which I think is weird, but I get it. There is a lot of pigmentation in these palettes, and maybe those other color stories, you know, created by Lorac had too much in them. And when looking up the brand, I did see that it wasn't cruelty-free. There are some vegan options, but the brand in and of itself isn't a cruelty-free brand. That also is a deal breaker for a lot of you out there, and I know that. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it here in this video. I am going to go find another palette to review next week, and I will be right back. All right, so I, again, went back and forth with this, you guys. So the palettes that remain in my palette collection, I don't have very many left, if I'm honest. And the ones that remain in my palette collection are things like, you know, quads or quints or palettes that I don't want to use, and that should give me some indication that I need to get rid of this palette, right? Or are brand new. So I have picked a couple. One that is not brand new to my collection period, but my collection as far as palettes for my eyes go, because I wasn't using it as a highlighting palette, so I thought I would move it into the eye category and see how I liked it, just because the colors in here are more eye category centric, if you ask me. And that one is this one. This is the Fenty Beauty Kilowatt Foil Freestyle Highlighting Palette, and this is what the colors in here are. So tell me how many of these you would use on your face as a highlighter, because that is why it wasn't getting any kind of use in my collection. It was in my highlighting palette drawer, and when I went through my highlighting palettes, I think last year or earlier this year maybe, I was like, I'm moving this to eyeshadow, because I really do feel like I could get better use out of it in eyeshadow. So I did pick this. Now this is a highlighting palette, so it's full of what is considered highlights, which is, you know, those lid shades that are super impactful. To go with this, I decided to pick a new palette, one that I think will actually pair with it quite well, and one that I am so excited to use because it was on my list forever, and it is the Huda Beauty Wild Obsessions palette. This one is the Python, and this is what it looks like, and I think that these will partner quite well, actually. So let me know what your thoughts are on this. And this one does have a lot of mattes in it. There's 5 mattes and 4 shimmers. So even the shimmers that are in this, I think, are different than the shimmers that I'm going to find in this palette. So I don't think that they are going to compete all that often in an eye look for space. So those are the 2 palettes that I will be coming to you next week to review, and I hope that you're into it. I hope that you'll want to subscribe to see that. I really do hope that you just loved what you saw today and that you want to subscribe to my channel to see more. I have about 900 videos down underneath here. If you like click on, you know, the link down there where it has my picture, my bubble, and go to my videos offered. There's about 900 of them on there. I am confident you will find something on my channel that you love. So I do hope that you subscribe before you go. If you do that, please let me know in the comment section. I would love to welcome you personally, and I still am in a place where I answer every single one of the comments on my channel. However, with that said, please let it be known, sometimes it takes me a minute to get back to you. I do work, like I said, a very full-time job at Ulta Beauty. It keeps me busy Monday through Friday. I do answer comments as quickly as I possibly can, but sometimes it does take me a couple days. So know that I see it, I'm out here, I want to comment back, and I will. It just is going to take me a minute. With that said, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I do hope that you had a wonderful Independence Day if you celebrate Independence Day. I know that there are some of you out there that live in different countries and you don't do that, but I do hope that your weekend was awesome nonetheless. I also hope that you and yours are healthy, that you're safe, that you're getting along as best you can in this crazy world that's going on right now. I also hope that you're loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye friends.